Hello and welcome to our second episode of the Dynasty Fantasy Football Central podcast. I'm Michael Moore. He is Jonathan Scott. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hello, people.
We are going to look at the new faces for this episode of the NFC South. Be sure to go to our website, dynastyfantasyfootballcentral.com, when you're not listening to these sexy voices. And, Jonathan, I think we'll get started at the bottom of the barrel. So why don't you kick it off?
The bottom of the barrel for right now, man. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the reason I'm trying to get to Vegas and put money on them to win the division now, and it all starts with Mike Evans. He played every weekend on a national televised game. Everyone knows who he is. But I don't think people realize the situation he's running into right now could be just an absolute prime breakout star his first year in the league. Big, tall, obviously, you know the physical abilities. Only played football for about 4 years now total. The guy is still developing. And not only that, but he's going to an offense where Josh McCown, when he signed with the Bucs, asked them, hey, look, make this Chicago 2.0, where I just have big, tall freaks on the outside, and they go play basketball. And that's what they've done. Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson on the outside are just going to box people out. And Evans, at least he's not someone that just boxes someone out. He also has very good hands, high points the ball very well. I think you're looking at a wide receiver one, like from day one.
Yeah, and I think, especially lately, I really started thinking about drafting him ahead of Watkins. Talent-wise, just like you and I have talked about offline, that's sort of a 1A, 1B type deal. But, when you look at the situation, Tampa is eminently more qualified to be productive than Buffalo, at least at this point. They've got McCown, like you said. Vincent Jackson is a very underrated guy. I mean, he steadily produces every year.
Yeah.
They still have Doug Martin, who's going to be coming back from injury, who, given he's not going to be the 300-carry guy he was a couple years ago, but, hey, he's probably still a low-end running back one in dynasty leagues. They brought in Safarian Jenkins, which we'll touch on in a moment. But, yeah, I'm with you. I think, Evans is too talented to ignore. And I think he enters a good situation. He's got a quarterback that can get him the ball. So
not only him, but and we'll talk about it later. But can you imagine being Josh McCown, being a 34-year-old journeyman who's a free agent based off 4 games where he balled out? I mean, kudos to him. But being able to call your shot basically to the front office, like, yeah, I'll sign here. You need to go get these guys because this is the only way I'm any good. Otherwise, I'm gonna suck.
And I think it goes back to, just more evidence that they aren't believers in Glennon for whatever reason. And I'm not a big Glennon sympathizer, but it's not like he played horribly. But at the same time, look, they gave McCown a 2-year deal. I think it was $10 million guaranteed and maybe an additional, 5 with incentives. So it's not like it's a prove-it type deal with McCown. I mean, I think they're pretty, at least short-term, committed to using him as at least in a transition period. And, hey, if it takes off, they can address it then. But, with Evans, he's pretty solid. So with our dynasty rankings, I think right now he was at 11.
Mm-hmm.
So would you buy that or would you sell him on that ranking?
I don't know. I'd buy it, man. I don't know.
Because right now, 11 in most 12-team leagues, that means he's going to be a wide receiver one. So if you were starting a dynasty league today, are you content with him as your wide receiver one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't understand what the downside is of this, and I've heard all these squirrely stats about what side of the field he catches the ball on, what kind of offense he played in. I mean, stuff like look.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I wasn't going to call you out, but if you're going to let America know it was you, and awesome. But,
hey, I backtrack. It's all good.
Thanks. The only reason this guy fails is because the coaching staff isn't competent, which I don't think it is, or he gets into personal issues off the field, which nobody can predict. So I don't see how this guy fails. Huge target, huge. I mean, even quarterbacks with accuracy issues, just throw it within a 10, 12-foot range either way, and you hit a diving or jumping target. So, if he's a wide receiver one, at the back end of a first round for teams, or if he's your first receiver on your team, I'm fine with it. You've got a guy for 7, 8 years, I think, who at the very least, even though most metrics will tell you can't count on touchdowns year to year, they're hard to predict, he's somebody I think who can hold steady between 9 and 13 touchdowns a year, no questions asked.
Yeah, I think so. And Vincent Jackson's going to be good in the transitional sort of period, but hey, he's going to move on at some point too, and Evans is probably going to be the guy there. So,
Yeah.
all right. So I think we've covered him, and I think we both decided we're pretty high on him. Another guy that not necessarily polarizing, but still I think people have some varying opinions on is Safarian Jenkins, the tight end they drafted in the second round. He's big, he's tall. Going into this year, you probably could argue that he was the top tight end prospect. I mean, that be fair to say before the college football season started?
Sure. I mean, looking at, whatever media site you want to going into the year before, well, him and Ebron, they were split 1A, 1B, but he was often considered the 1A in that situation. So it's hard to argue that.
Right. So, there's a lot to like with him, obviously. He probably will start right away. I mean, you had Tim Wright last year sort of coming on in the end, but
he's not a tight end.
Yeah, I think we can all concede that much. So, he's another guy that I think they hope they can just stick in the back of the end zone and throw it up and see what happens. So, what else do you got?
Not a whole lot. It goes back to the theory of Josh McCown is now the GM of the Bucs, and it's just I don't know what else to say about the guy. They're going to have to find. It's interesting, right? Like if they really think Tim Wright is a tight end, that changes things a little bit because you can't have a 222-pound tight end inline blocking in an offense. That would be tantamount to disaster. So that puts Jenkins more inline and gives him more blocking responsibilities. Which, newsflash, not great at that, to be honest. But it also changes his responsibilities in offense. I don't think you'll see him going out as much, but I think if he's used correctly and they have the right idea for him, a Jeremy Shockey type role in his early years in New York, I think is something you could really see, and it really is a good comparison because they're both really good athletes, both very tall, big catching radiuses, and they're going to make people look dumb just on the basis of their athleticism. They have a quarterback just like Eli. So Eli was more of a quarterback that would throw it up just because he was scared and had no one else to go to. Josh McCown knows that's his best chance is to give the guy a chance. So I think we'll see more faith in him early on too.
The Eli Manning example is epitomized by the David Tyree catch. But again, so Safarian Jenkins is a guy, I think you're right on everything you said. He's not a fast guy. That's what people got to remember. He's not a Vernon Davis or even a Jay Samaro where he's gonna, catch it and break away and just run away from people. But like you said, he's going to be a guy that you can throw it in the middle of the field and he's going to win that battle. So right now, we have him 16th in our dynasty ranking. So, high-end tight end 2. What is your sense of that? Do you feel good about that placement? I mean, do you think he should be higher or lower?
No, I'd say it's about right. There's a lot unknown with that because of a new coaching staff who traditionally have given rookies a chance, but you got to prove it along the way. We have an idea of the offense just because of the people that are there and the way they drafted, but we sort of need to see how it plays out entirely. I'm okay with that because the upside with him is so great that I think it's worth a chance there to even bump him up a little bit more than that because you're buying on the young side of his career. I'm also not seeing a team in that division other than the Panthers that can actually play defense. There's a chance that he could just ball out because he plays in the South. So I don't mind that at all. I think it just depends. Again, it goes back to the talent versus opportunity thing. I think the talent's there. We'll see how the opportunity plays out. It'll be something to monitor.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Okay. So now to your boy, Josh McCown, and I'll just let you take this one and sit back and watch.
Yeah, I don't know why you call him my boy. I just think it's interesting. I find his whole thing to be very interesting. You don't have to come to us to know that many people in many forums have said, hey, this guy played for 12 years and was kind of crappy but had 4 games, so awesome, let's sign up. And to your point, I didn't think Glennon was that bad. Many advanced metrics had him as above average to average at worst. Working with an offense that didn't have Doug Martin. We're down a few receivers, too, not to mention some of their best offensive linemen. So, but again, new coaching staff, new regime, I get it. I think he's a starter. He's a QB2 in your league because he's going to start. And because, if we're being honest, outside of, even Atlanta doesn't really have a running back per se. They might have the best weapons of the entire division. I know everyone says New Orleans, but that's more based off Drew Brees. and Jimmy Graham. Outside of that, it's a lot of unproven things. And if you're looking at Jenkins, or excuse me, not Jenkins, if you're looking at Evans, Vincent Jackson, Jenkins as well, I guess, Safarius Jenkins, sorry, and Doug Martin, that's 4 weapons that really no one else can match. So if Josh McCown just stays upright and, doesn't crap the bed, he should be a QB2 in all leagues.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. So if you've got a dynasty team that is ready to win now, I think he could probably be a pretty good buy low guy, especially. So,
I think so. I mean, if you're missing, if QB2, or if you're in a 2 QB league, or if you're missing a QB and the rest of your team is stacked, I wouldn't hate going into the season with McCown as your starter and just hoping that he stays upright and they can figure it out. I mean, Lovie Smith did run a team, and he did run an offense with Rex Grossman as the starter, and they were competent across the board. So he has an idea.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Okay. Who's next?
Charles Sims, man. Again, this is your guy. You would know and have more faith about him than I would. So back at you. Go nuts.
Yeah, and it's more of a situational thing. I mean, everything coming out of camp has indicated that they're going to give him the ball on 3rd down, or rather, he's going to be the passing down back. And there's even some talk that he could spell Doug Martin a little bit, which is interesting to me because it's not like they had horrible guys last year when Martin went down. I mean, Mike James was pretty competent until he went down, obviously. But, they spent a pretty high draft pick on Sims, and like I said, they seem to love him at this point. So, and more to your point, I mean, the indications are that Tedford there, the new offensive coordinator, is going to run sort of a run-first offense, but, it goes back to then why are you bringing in a guy like Evans and got Vincent Jackson and Safarian Jenkins as far as you're just going to run the ball all day? So,
well, I mean, if it's a hypothetical question, sorry, I'm going to answer it anyway. I mean, you're running an offense that's based off play action, obviously, and pass it down the field. So you get those guys knowing you're going to either hand it off or fake handing it off and throwing it 35 yards on the field every time. So, so it kind of fits. I mean, I'll agree the Sims thing is a little bit weird. It's because they did strike. I mean, they struck pretty lucky with the running backs they found. Whether it was the offensive line, which the coaching staff seems to agree it was all O-line produced, or it was the running backs, you at least prove that you don't need to upgrade because those two in tandem work together so well. Funny you said earlier, like, you don't think Doug Martin will end up getting another 300-carry season. I kind of think he's right in line for it, especially if these other running backs either drop back down to their actual skill level where they were drafted in real life, or if Sims just can't carry the load early on. Like, I can see Martin getting used early and often and really throughout the season, especially if Mike Evans and Jenkins take time to get used to the playbook. I can see them relying quite heavily on them. And again, looking at the division, the Saints have nothing inside. The Falcons have nothing inside. Like, you want to pound those guys inside, and they have the guy to do it.
Right. So, yeah, I think Sims is definitely a situational guy. So, if training camp and preseason show that, hey, they're really passing it a lot, then I think he's a guy you need to look out for. But, if they are committed as sort of this, run-heavy vertical offense, then, I think Sims is probably a guy you need to back away from.
And it will be a change of offense. I mean, he comes from a Holgerson offense in West Virginia, spread offense, 5 wide, 1 running back, with 4 wide at times. And so, I mean, the change of pace back system for him will work perfectly in the beginning. He'll be a 3rd down guy that can catch out of the backfield, do some other things out of the shotgun. Like you said, if he's going to a brand new offense, keep an eye on it, because I know it sounds ridiculous. I know a running ball, find hole, hit hole, run fast, but there are other intricacies, especially Lovie Smith is going to demand that he know before they just turn him loose.
Right. So, yeah, it's some guy to watch, but, when opportunity is so important, he could be a guy that gets some action early, so just be on the lookout.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
All right, moving teams.
So the depressing part of the podcast, Atlanta Falcons.
This will be quick.
It'll be very quick, much like their season was not last year. Hi-oh. So we'll start with Devontae Freeman. I'm kind of looking at the notes here, and it kind of sums it up. A lot of hype for this guy, a lot of early buzz, which take for that what you will. I think a lot of that has to do with that they just have guys. They don't have anybody really worth anything on the roster already, so it's easy for him to just fit in, do what they want, do it well, and look really good. And he probably should take over. If he really is as good as they're saying out of camp and out of these OTAs, he probably should take over early. So if you're looking at an impact guy early on, maybe you target this guy a little earlier than you should, just because you need impact sooner than later.
Yeah, he comes in. He's, by all indications, he's pro-ready in pass protection. He's got good hands, so he's going to be very good for that offense. It's just a matter of Steven Jackson. That's what it's going to come down to, and how much they, even if he is healthy, they're going to have to spell him at some point. He's not a guy that is a workhorse anymore. So, I think we've proven Jaquiz Rodgers, while has been very popular in the last couple of years at the back end of drafts, is not going to be the guy. They're going to move on from him pretty quickly. So, like you said, if a guy like Freeman can just not shit the bed, essentially, then I think he's got a chance to do something, and especially early on. I mean, and we'll sort of cover this as we cover the other teams, but running backs of any position in dynasty leagues, at least for rookies, is very hard to break through. I think even last year you had maybe 2 guys that were starting early, even then only one of them ended up starting week 1 because Le'Veon Bell got hurt. So, with a guy like Freeman, even though he's not going to start week 1, barring injury, I think by the end of the year he could. I really do. I think it could be a 50-50 thing by the time the year's out, just to facilitate what they want to do with that offense. And if everything's clicking there and they're back to the Falcons that, were 1 game away from the Super Bowl, he's going to be a part of it, I promise you. So, for me personally, he's probably my 3rd-rated dynasty rookie back at this point, behind the usual suspects of Sankey and Hyde. And even ahead, it's probably between him and Hill for me, but Hill for me just has a lot. I know you do, and we'll cover that in another episode.
I know.
Hill for me just has. Well, I know. Hill just has a lower ceiling for me than Freeman does, and probably a higher floor than Freeman, but I just don't see him busting out. I mean, he could take over the Green Ellis role, but a guy like Freeman, I think, could take down the every down role. So that's why I like him, at least at this point. But provided he doesn't give up this opportunity he's been given, then I think he's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I buy all that.
Okay. Well, we were only covering the new faces of the division, so the Falcons don't have a lot, at least for fantasy football purposes, but we can touch on the Roddy Whites and Julio Joneses of the world. So.
Yeah, I mean, newsflash: the Falcons didn't bring in anybody interesting this year. So, so let's go to the 2 most impactful players that really are basically like new players. They didn't really play it all last year, and it's Roddy White and Julio Jones. We'll cover them together. I'm Roddy White owner. I've been for a few years. I would love to see the guy come back, and he did pretty well a couple games once he got a little bit healthier, but never really could seem to stay healthy week in, week out. When he got there, I mean, you know how it is, man. Leg injuries, lower body injury for receivers, not good. Not good at all. I will say the only boon to them from a fantasy perspective, and maybe not from an efficiency perspective, but they're going to do everything they can to just throw the football. Right. Even with Tony Gonzalez gone and no real fill-in at tight end other than Tuiolo, which, I mean, if you want to feature him in the offense, go nuts. But they're going to throw to these 2 early and often because I think Steven Jackson is done. So where else do you go? So for Roddy White, I mean, if he starts out the first 6 to 8 weeks of the year on fire, sell. Just sell as soon as you possibly can. Get whatever you can for him. Julio, I tend to think he's more of a freak of nature, and like this broken foot, although it's the same foot he broke before the draft, and it's the one he's had problems with, I think he can recover more for another 3 to 4 year period than I have any faith in Roddy White.
So bringing up Julio, who's always, he's one of those guys that sort of baffles me. I mean, he's ranked consistently as a top 5 dynasty receiver, and he did break out. It's not like he hasn't shown he can't do it, but he's such a tease, man. For me, I mean, it's just a total boomer bust thing, and for me, we have him rated as a top 5 receiver. I would sell at that point personally. I really would. I just don't. It just scares me if you're investing a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick in your dynasty draft on a guy like Julio. It just scares me.
Well, and to take it back to the last team we just covered, I mean, if someone came to you straight up for Julio Jones versus Mike Evans, I mean, man,
Oof.
you got to think about that, right?
I would probably still lean Julio, only
Would you?
because Evans
Okay.
is a rookie. And given, that's the ironic part, is they've compared these guys, Watkins and Evans, to being as close as NFL ready as
Yeah.
possible. A lot like Julio was a couple years ago. So, and they have a lot of the same attributes. But I would probably lean Julio, but I would definitely regret it immediately after. I think. So,
Feel dirty all over.
yeah. So, but I think we can agree with Julio. If you get a solid offer for multiple picks or multiple players, I'd probably do it.
I'd agree.
So, okay, well that ends the depressing portion, and we can go into truly your boy, Mr. Cooks in New Orleans. So have at it.
I love him
I know.
so
Jersey?
much.
Have you gotten his jersey yet?
No, because he's a Saint, and I just can't
Okay.
do that yet.
Fair enough.
So look, most people do this in tiers, and that's fine. If you want to break out your position players by tiers instead of ranking it numerically, I get it, because it makes it easier to make a decision on draft day. And if you're doing this by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc., Brandon Cooks for me is in tier 1 with Watkins and Evans, and it's not even close. Like, those are the three elite
Wow.
guys.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
So the only knock you can have on this guy, and it's not his fault, and it hasn't affected him at any level of football yet, is his height. Like, he's 5'10" at best, but this guy athletically, on tape, and the offenses he's run, the routes he's run, everything, other than being an absolute crazy person, compares exactly to Steve Smith, formerly of the Panthers, now of the Ravens. He's a freak of an athlete. His ability to get in and out of breaks is just second to none. He finished first in the three-cone drill, the three-cone shuttle, all that stuff at the combine of his entire class. Catches everything around him. We played for an Oregon State team that had a quarterback that ran hot and cold for all the years he was there, and no other real receiving threat next to him, yet still won the Bolitnikoff Award as the best receiver in the nation. And not only that, he's going to what is the single most creative offense in the entire NFL, and he's filling in for what should have been and was in the past the most productive slot guy / running back in the NFL, in Darren Sproles. And the reason I love him for an immediate impact and down the road is that there is a defined role for him from day one, and the role for him is what he excels at from day one. So it wouldn't surprise me if this guy gets 100-something touches throughout the year, 1,300 to 1,500 yards, and just blows up, because he can.
Interesting.
What worries you about him? What makes you pause and say, I want no part of this? Like, what is it?
I agreed with everything you said up until the point about the team, which is given funny, because it's his gift and his curse, I think. It's his gift, and I agree with everything you said. For this year, for 2014, he could top all rookies, quite honestly, because of the offense he's going to be in and the fact that they invested so much in him. And he's going to start from day one. I will grant you that. So, if we were talking redraft leagues, I would agree with you about the tier 1 status amongst the rookies. I really would. For Dynasty, it concerns me a little bit because, that there's so many mouths to feed in that offense. Well, there traditionally has been.
There you go.
Yet they still focus on a couple of guys, namely Jimmy Graham, and for some reason Marcus Colston's still there. I don't get it, but he is. So I think, look, he's going to be good. I'm not saying he's not going to be good, but for Dynasty purposes, long term, I think there's a bit of a ceiling there, and I think some other guys have higher ceilings than him that are ranked behind him at the moment. That would be my concern with him, quite honestly, because you have to look at the other receivers in the Saints in that offense besides Colston and Graham and see what they've done, because I think that's probably comparable. And I agree with you about the Darren Sproles role having to be divvied up. But you still had Pierre Thomas last year take over a large portion of that when Sproles was injured. I mean, Pierre Thomas had 77 receptions. 77. That's ridiculous.
He won't cut into that. So okay, I'm not exactly a football genius, per se.
Well,
However, a few things.
So hard on himself.
Well, I mean, look, I'm more
There
than
you
a
go.
pretty face,
Okay.
but I'm not a genius. So,
I know.
who was the Saints slot receiver last year?
I think probably, well, Lance Moore is more on the outside, and then Kenny Stills took over. I don't know. They've had
You've
a
already
road.
taken too long, and this is my point. So,
Fine, who was it?
if he takes Darren Sproles out of the backfield, he takes that role, and also transitions into the slot receiver they've never had. He's never going to leave the field ever. And
Sure.
you're worried about Marcus Colston taking his receptions and taking his Marcus Colston, and maybe this is just where we differ on Colston. I think he's just about done. Multiple microfracture surgeries,
We've
going into
said
his 10th
that.
year, 32 years old.
We've said that, and he won't die. He won't go
Well,
away.
I
Okay.
mean, one of those
So,
things.
for me, a big thing obviously is injury history and just being out on the field. And somehow Colston manages to stay out there, even with all the issues. So, look, I think being a rookie, there's still a lot to see, but I just wonder where Cooks is going to fit in. I mean, he's never going to be your primary target in that offense. I don't think he can be. I mean, do you?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, then that's I think where we differ then, because I think you're looking at it from a perspective on, hey, give it 2 or 3 years and he'll be the top target in that offense. For me, I still don't think he's going to be. Do I think he's going to be an integral part? Yeah, and I think he's going to steadily be the number 2 or 3 target there for the next 7 to 9 years. But for me, it's just I think some other guys that are rookies have higher ceilings than him. That's just me though.
My only question would be, would you say that there are plays for the Packers where Reggie Cobb is the number one option, or Randall Cobb, excuse me, is the number one option on plays? Is he a number one receiver in that offense?
I don't like Randall Cobb anyway, so that's not a fair. You're asking the wrong guy, man.
All right.
So I think that's where we probably differ. I don't think they're gonna convert Cooks into their top target once a Colston and a Graham leaves. And furthermore, and given this is way down the road, because I really don't think Drew Brees is going anywhere anytime soon. But
no,
he's up there as well. It's not like he's a young guy too. So I think that's where we differ. Look, for me, still firmly tier 2 amongst the rookies, firmly. But certainly top 4 receiver as far as rookies go in dynasty leagues. But yeah, he's not up to Watkins and Evans level for me, man.
You're crazy.
So, well, what rank do we have him on there? That may be easier to determine where we stand on it.
We got him at 25th. And
okay, so if you're in a 12-team league, dynasty league, you're looking at him as a low wide receiver 2 or maybe high wide receiver 3, right? So for me, look, if he's my 3rd receiver, I grant you, I would love that all day. I would be perfectly content with that. If he's my 2nd, though, that's where I start getting a little dicey. I mean, given if you've got a guy like Calvin Johnson or Demaryius Thomas as your 1st receiver, yeah, you could probably get by with Cooks. But if your top receiver is a guy like Cobb, if you went that route or whatever, that starts concerning me. What about you?
I think I'd put him in like the 14 to 18 range, man. If he's my number 2 with a legit number 1 in front of him, I'm ecstatic. Because I think it's only a matter of time until they realize they have to force feed the guy the ball. He's just simply too good at too many things, and he's only 20 years old.
Sure,
and that's he can't even drink yet. He's going to get better.
And that's a very underrated trait, especially for receivers, which we'll cover, with the Panthers and Kelvin Benjamin. But a guy like Cooks is still very young, which means he's got a couple years extra that some other guys don't. So. Look, I think we're pretty close to our assessment of Cooks, but we definitely have a dividing line there.
That's fair.
All right, moving on.
Oh, somehow the Saints had $2 million in cap space to spend this year and signed a safety to an almost $50 million contract. I love the NFL. It's great.
NFL. So,
Jarius Byrd. I mean, do you have anything to say?
Well, I think there's some potential there. He did well in Buffalo. He averaged, 90 tackles, topped out in double digits for passes defense. So, and he goes to a defense that's going to be very aggressive. And, he has finally there's finally talent on these Saints defense, which you couldn't say a couple years ago. So, I think for me, I think it's a bit of a gamble if he's your DB1, but DB2 I think is a lock. I think if he's your DB2, then you're golden.
Yeah,
he's still pretty young. I mean, he's only 27. So
yeah,
if you had him and you've got pretty deep rosters and you've got a lot of keepers, he's a guy potentially that could be your safety keeper. He really could.
I think this is a perfect example of where fantasy versus reality intersect, and you have two different opinions of where, like, for fantasy, as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't think he'll ever be the 8 or 9 or 10 pick guy he was in Buffalo that one year. I think that was more or less flukish than anything else.
Sure, and interceptions are fluky. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I just also don't think he's going to be around the ball that often, man. Like, there's so many.
And that's fair. That's fair. I mean,
can you name anybody else in the secondary starting for New Orleans?
Yeah, Vaccaro.
He's really good.
I know.
But you got to stay healthy. So that's fair, right? Like, so who's going to stay? Who's going to stay in the box to play the run? Who's going to be in coverage between those two?
Right. No, I agree. And
there's so many different ways to attack the Saints defensively, to be honest, that it's sort of like everybody can have some. Like, who wants to get picked on now? And I feel like they can be really schemed against, and I don't think Jarius Byrd is ever part of that scheme where you say, we're going to attack him. Now that Vaccaro's on my mind, they do have 2 Pro Bowl talent safeties to where you can't do that as much. But if one of those is up in the box, either on the running back, playing a run fit, or on a tight end, then half the field is going to be – the other half of the other one isn't, is where you're going to want to go. Right. So he should be productive. But again, to me, he's just a guy.
Sure. Well, and I think this is a classic case of, and it very well could be, I mean, we're both 49er fans, so we know for a fact that drafting anyone in the secondary in San Francisco for dynasty purposes is a bad idea.
Stupid. Yeah.
The defense, I mean, seriously, the front 7 is just too good. They don't let guys in the backfield. They just don't. So they're not going to rack up tackles. And unless you've got someone superhuman like Earl Thomas, who we both love, and Bird is not it, you're really leaving it up. You're really leaving it up to the circumstances. But again, that's why I sort of give him an uptick. Is he's in a very aggressive defense that they're gonna rush a lot, and they're gonna rush him a lot too. Quite honestly,
they're gonna get thrown on. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna have a chance. They have Sports View in basketball where they can track how many miles a person's run, how much effort they're putting in. Like, if they tracked that for the New Orleans Saints defense, they're gonna run more miles than anybody in the league.
Right. Conditioning is gonna be important. I agree.
Yeah, so he'll do things. I have no idea how to equate that though. I'll be honest.
Sure. No, and like I said, I think he's a guy. And I completely agree. I think he's a guy that is a lot better in real life than fantasy. But there's potential there for some plays there, just because it's going to be a good defense. So keep an eye out on that.
Agreed.
All right, moving on. Who do we got?
Well, quite honestly, we're going to the Panthers. Which, if the Falcons were depressing, the Panthers, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah, you really mislabeled that one. This is where it gets real depressing.
Like, as a Cam Newton owner who thought he had the world in his hand, God, you bastards. So this is all going to be based around the wide receiving core. The entire Panthers talk is going to be around the receiving core. We'll start with Kelvin Benjamin, okay? Who I think it's safe to say is probably the most polarizing rookie receiver this year. Is that fair?
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah, you either think he's going to excel early or you think he's going to blow. So.
Yep. And there's really, I can't see anyone being like, no, I think he'll be okay. No. Like, it's either this tight end with 4 or 5 speed is going to be awesome, or he's just never going to figure it out. And I wish I had something more elegant to say, but if you watch him in college, it was the same thing. It was like 8 for 250 and 3 touchdowns, or 4 drops. Right. And he sometimes did that in games. There was a game against Florida where he had 3 drops in the first half and 3 TDs in the second half.
Right. Right. So let's just go down the list.
Oh, Jesus.
He had one productive year at Florida State. statistically, it typically doesn't pan out if a guy had one good year receiving in college, goes to the draft, and then tries to make a career out of it. It's just not impossible, but it's a rare thing. So he's got that going against him. He's 23 already, which that is another thing that certifiably works against you as a receiver in the NFL. If you start out this late, odds are against you. Just like we said with Cooks. Cooks literally has 2 years on him that you can get out of Brandon Cooks before you move on. So again, that's another thing that would concern me. But at the same time, the size and the ability is better than anyone else that was in this draft, receiver-wise.
Well, and the play that won the national title for Florida State was just putting Benjamin in the slot, or what was close enough to the slot, essentially. Just having him run a slant, box the guy out, throw it 9 feet in the air, and he was the only one that can go get it. Right. And I know a lot of stuff doesn't translate to the next level. Being really tall and big, that kind of translates to the next level. Like, you can do that in the right matchup. So and then there's the, again, common theme that I say over and over again, talent versus opportunity. Like, there's no one, and you'll figure this out as we talk about the next two guys, there is nobody else to throw the ball to. There's just none. Right. This kid is going to sink or swim in the first 4 weeks of the season. We're going to find out a lot about him, not only mentally, emotionally, but the skill as well. Because Cam Newton can throw a really good ball, and he throws it really hard, and he'll put it in the right place. If he's dropping balls all over the place or running the wrong routes, etc., I don't know how else do you help the kid?
Right. Well, and that's honestly my big concern with him is even if he shows a level of promise early on, the crappy part for him is defenses are just going to roll over on him. I mean, it's not like they're going to give him a chance to, show that ability. They're going to come over on him, and they're not going to let him do anything. So, and that's the tough part. That's the tough pill to swallow if you draft Benjamin is, look, even if he's good the first month, great. They're going to bear down on him, and they're not going to let him do anything.
As they should.
And there's still going to be a run-first offense. I mean, we have to remember that. They're not suddenly going to go 65% pass just because they got a guy like Benjamin. I mean, they're still going to run the ball a lot. So it's not like, hey, they're going to chuck it and he's going to get his share. I mean, he's still going to have to fight for targets in that rotation. So, I think we have him ranked 38th amongst all receivers in Dynasty rankings. So you're looking at high-end fourth receiver, which I think is, probably about right. I mean, it may be a little low. I mean, I think I might be okay if you were my third receiver going into this.
I'll be honest, I don't know. How there's always one person you can make fun of for drafting somewhere? No matter where this guy gets drafted by whoever it is, I can't make fun of him. I just can't. Oh, you're going to have to pause it. Because you don't exist. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Huh, that was weird.
It happens. We're so close, too.
I know. Hold on.
I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick while you do this.
No, it's still going. Let's just finish out this. We're very, very close. Trust me.
All right. Where do you want to start? Where did it start?
That part of the podcast will just be silence for a couple seconds. So
you can cut that out, can't you?
I could, but that's okay. It's raw. It's okay.
All right. Fine.
Anyway, yeah. So we have him 38th right now. Where do you? I mean, are you good with that, or are you? I can hear you.
Can you?
Yeah, I just can't see you.
I can't. That is what it is.
That's too bad. Okay.
It happens.
Okay. Well, let's. I think this is probably God's way of saying that the Panther receivers blow. So.
Could be.
So yeah. So Benjamin 38th, higher or lower for you?
I don't know, man. I mean, as I was saying before, technology cut us off. If this guy gets drafted like 23rd, I can't laugh at the dude. You can't make fun of him because you just don't know. He could go nuts just because of the opportunity. So I'd probably play it safe, put him between 35 and 40, like he is right now, and I think most people will.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think, and at the same token, I think you've got some guys that could reach for him. Quite honestly, I think they could view him as someone that's right behind a Cooks, even, which I would not agree with, but I think people could see it. So
say you watch your mouth.
I know. So okay, let's lump the rest of the Carolina receivers together real quick, shall we? And I'll let you take that one.
Good God! All right, Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant. I'm pretty sure if I had 4 months to train, I could guard one of these people. Like I could line up across them.
I think so. Yeah, and you're pretty tall. So.
I'm tall. Like I said, I just.
There you go.
Cool.
Well, and yeah, just so you know, pretty sure I can edit the YouTube video, so I will just cut all this out, I think.
That was the idea. That's what I figured.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, so you have Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant. Neither one are good. I mean, Cotchery, surprisingly, actually was decently spry with Pittsburgh last year. It seemed like Roethlisberger actually kind of liked him in clutch situations. I hate to use that phrase, but
he did. No, I agree with that.
He got open when he was needed. When a play breaks down, he could get open, which Cam Newton is just a younger version of Roethlisberger in that way. Jason Avant, I have zero faith in being able to do anything at all that's football related at this point in his career.
As you should.
I will not touch him. He's not draftable to me. Sorry. He glorified tight end, but not in the Anquan Bolden way. So, Cotchery is worth a flyer, I think, just because he'll stay healthy and he'll get ball thrown because he has to. But, by the way, Greg Olsen owners rejoice.
Yeah, that's me. So
yeah.
I'm very happy.
But that would be my last one. Cotchery is a fine person. Avant, he might as well be herpes at a club. Like, don't even go near it.
A very appropriate analogy, I think. So.
Sorry. I hate to refer to a human being as herpes. It's rude, but man, Avant is 10-foot pole rule for me.
Yeah, no, he's herpes of dynasty leagues. I will grant you that.
He is.
So.
Oh.
Anyway, all right. Well, I think that probably concludes this episode before we have another technical shortage. So, no, be sure to go to the site, dynastyfantasyfootballcentral.com. You can find us on Twitter at dynasty_FFC. And we'll see you next time. We're going to cover the NFC North and all of our friends there. So, see you next time.